you guys as libertarians are not big fans of tariffs. We had a conversation when Trump first announced that he might slap 10% tariffs across the board months and months and months ago. And now he's done it. It's not 10% across the board, but these are big old tariffs on two of our so-called friends. So what do you make of them?
I mean, they're huge tariffs. Like, this is the time for him to tout them today. He should do it today, because the tail of this is not going to look good for him. And we already see this echoing out into, certain input costs. I mean, we've seen a lot of numbers in this, and the Wall Street Journal has been covering this pretty closely, is that in anticipation of these tariffs, the input costs for a lot of things, a lot of American manufacturing have gone through the roof. You have also seen a lot of Republican congressmen, Republican senators talking both off the record and on the record that they're really fearful of what this is going to do, particularly in agriculture, because we always think about this as an export thing only. I mean, import thing only. We want to put barriers up because someone's being unfair to us, and we will reap the benefits. Remember, Donald Trump says that the tariffs are going to pay for themselves. On their own, the most lovely word in the English language, according to Donald Trump, is tariff. So why would you ever take them down? Why would you ever use them as leverage? Why not just keep them in forever if they're so consequential to the American economy and in a positive way? I mean, there's literally no economist that you can find that believe that trade is a net negative. They think it's a net positive that has some sort of factors that aren't great that you have to account for. The hollowing out of certain American industries that was kind of inevitable in any case. But there was some consequences of free trade. But on net, it is a very, very positive thing for the American consumer. And when you see people like American farmers, they export so much stuff, and this is going to really hit their bottom line, and they're worried about it. And
even Trump has suggested it might.
Yeah, and Ron Johnson today was talking about it. And these are much more consequential tariffs than the first time around. So I think that, the Wall Street Journal had an editorial the other day that said it was, we're again back to the dumbest tariffs of all time. We'll see. They do not look good for the American consumer. And we are going to take a hit. It's just going to happen. It's just a matter of how much can, the American voter and consumer take of this, and how much will they blame Donald Trump in the long run?
Just FYI, this is what the White House put out on a fact sheet on its tariffs to justify the tariffs in part. And I'm bringing this part up because it mentions more about Canada. A recent study recognized Canada's heightened domestic production of fentanyl and its growing footprint within international narcotics distribution. Canada-based drug trafficking organizations maintain robust super labs, mostly in rural and dense areas in Western Canada, some of which can produce 44 to 66 pounds of fentanyl weekly. Last year's northern border fentanyl seizures, though smaller than Mexico's, could kill 9.5 million Americans due to the drug's potency. Proof of Canada's growing role in this crisis, fentanyl seizures at the northern border in the first 4 months of the fiscal year are quickly closing in on what was seized the entirety of fiscal year 2022. Both nations' failure to arrest traffickers, seize drugs, or coordinate with U.S. law enforcement constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to America's security. Do you think President Trump wants them to step up crackdown on fentanyl and greater crackdowns on the border? Or do you think President Trump wants to extract the 25% penalty? Like, which one is the better result in his mind?
I think the answer is yes. And I would also point out that White House press release, if you look at a map of where those border seizures happened, some of our states that border Canada have a lot of territory south of that border, and that's where some of those seizures took place. It wasn't necessarily like border interdictions. The reason that you mentioned fentanyl is that gives you the national security excuse. That's why. It's not. This is an emergency declaration. You need some reason for the emergency. So the emergency with Canada is fentanyl. The emergency in the southern border is for the cartels. I think it is appropriate to take it as BS. That it's just a fig leaf to do a thing that Trump wants to do, and that's also illustrated by the fact that it's one of a half a dozen. You mentioned banks, and there are U.S. banks that operate in Canada, including retail, but not in every single sector, and there is protectionism associated with that. But Trump has also mentioned the amount that Canada puts into NATO. There have been a whole number of different rationales for this. I think the best way to understand what Trump wants to do with tariffs is that Trump wants to do tariffs. He modeled himself after William McKinley. He likes to call himself tariff man, all of these things. He truly believes that we can swap the federal income tax with the tariff system, as was indeed the case in America between 1870 and 1913. So let's do that all over again. It can't happen because the president can do the tariffs, but cannot necessarily do the tax reform exactly the way that he wants to do it. That has to go through Congress. But he really truly believes this. And so he's going to, because precisely his second administration is a lot more lubricated. It's just going. It is getting things done in a way that the first administration is not. You'll see the rhetoric associated with his first State of the Union much different than his first, as you rightly pointed out, Megyn. But one of the things that he has wanted to do for a really long time is tariffs. And so that's why they are done. I don't think it's a negotiating tactic at this point. It is an expression of his ideology.
And one thing to add to that is that it's not an economic argument. I mean, obviously, the economic argument is a lot harder. So if you're making the argument that it's about fentanyl, like, look, no one in their right mind is going to say, great, we want more fentanyl coming. I mean, I think we could all agree that, Canada, Mexico, a more aggressive stance towards, drugs that are killing a huge number of people coming across the border is a good thing. Can you negotiate that in a way that doesn't punish, American consumers? I mean, we saw today, right before we started this, that Ontario slapped on a 25% tariff on electricity that they deliver to almost 2 million households in Michigan.
They promised
Minnesota.
that they would, and now they've done it.
Mm-hmm. And now they've done it. And, that's an immediate thing that people feel in their pocketbook. Is that a long-term good? I mean, what is the negotiation here? I mean, is this for American manufacturing? I just can't even, I mean, is it for fentanyl? It seems like a very, very, slapdash, willy-nilly policy that I think people are going to feel really quickly. So that's why I said, mentioning it tonight.
Have you looked, I confess I haven't looked at how bad the trade deficit is between the United States and Canada or the United States and Mexico. I know it was very bad between the United States and China, which is why they got, in addition to Trump put on tariffs in his first term, which the Democrats ripped, but then Joe Biden kept in place. And most economists actually wound up defending them. And then he came back into office and slapped another 10% on China. And now just last night slapped another 10% on China. But there's no question that there's a massive trade deficit between China and us. I don't know what it is between us and Canada and us and Mexico, but I'm sure there's a basic fairness argument to be made.
You could also talk to most economists who don't believe trade deficits are even a thing that matters. I mean, that ultimately it is a benefit to American consumers either way. I mean, that if there's some equalization is, and again, this is, something that I believe myself, but I am not an economist and should probably talk to an economist about this, but that is a widely held view that trade deficits are not something that is like an actual deficit, which is another thing that we have to pay attention to at the moment, our real deficit.
I mean, I guess we should know the answers to these, and maybe President Trump will fill in some of these blanks at his speech tonight and defend why he thinks these are necessary. But I, for one, am willing to see how it goes. I think if the economy really starts tanking and large swaths of the American economic machine start hurting, Trump will do something. I mean, that is really what he prides himself on more than anything, is his being a businessman, his cutting deals. And Trump in particular is not going to look at a suffering stock market for very long and say, I won't do anything. He will do something. That's the thing about Trump, is he's active. He doesn't just sit back and then go quiet and we see him half dead on a Rehoboth beach weeks later being wheeled out by his wife. Trump is active. So I feel like, let's give him a shot. You don't go out and buy a life jacket when the boat is sinking, and you don't buy gold when the economy has already collapsed. Clearly others are heeding this advice, as gold hit all-time highs already this year. It's not too late for you, too. And you could have Birch Gold help you diversify into physical gold. Birch Gold specializes in helping you convert an existing IRA or 401k in whole or in part into a tax-sheltered IRA in physical gold, and for no money out of pocket. One recent 5-star review said Birch Gold was, quote, knowledgeable, helpful, non-pressure. Get your free info kit on gold by texting the letters MK to the number 989898. There is no obligation, just useful information. With an A+ rating from the Better Business Bureau and countless 5-star reviews, text MK to 989898 and let the experts at Birch Gold help you secure your future today with gold. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.